Of the 536 videos that I made in the past 2 years of my disc golf career here on YouTube, by my ADHD brain count, 202 of those were disc reviews. But honestly, there are a lot of issues with disc reviews that you guys let me know about in the comments and that I see as someone who's probably in the top 5 most disc reviews made in that time period. So we need to talk about those problems. The main problem comes down to my golden rule of disc reviews, and that is basically all discs are good. And for almost all of them, there will be a way for you to throw them that is good, but subjectively, discs aren't good, which is why everyone loves disc reviews, or hates them, frankly. There are some hate watchers for sure. The big problem is all these discs behind me are not the same. You and I are not the same, and our play styles are not the same. So I'm not here to say that disc reviews need to stop. I certainly am not going to stop making them. I love making them, but I want to get better not only as a video maker, but also as a reviewer. And hopefully after we talk through all these problems, you might be able to make some better decisions when it comes to your disc golf game and buying discs. These are almost all the discs that I own. Plus these. Plus these. Plus these bad boys. I actually just reorganized this whole thing today, and I already know that some of you guys are going to absolutely hate how I did it. Flight numbers, maybe the most divisive thing in all of disc golf. I actually organized this by each individual company that I had a bunch of ordered by speed. The thing is, flight numbers are not standard. This is a big problem for disc reviews, especially because there's no overall sanctioning for flight numbers. Each company makes them up individually, and that essentially just means that flight numbers are a form of advertisement or marketing for the company, but because they are used by the company, you have to talk about them as a reviewer because people who are buying the discs and throwing the discs care about them. Here's my MVP rack where we have the Trail, which I just reviewed yesterday. I talked a lot about how this is a quote-unquote 10 speed because that's what MVP calls it, and ultimately speed maybe should just be replaced with rim size. How far this is from this. The problem is MVP apparently, according to some comments, measures from the top side of this, and there could be an angle going down to the flight plate, and the PDGA measures from the bottom of that, and so there's some discrepancy between the PDGA and MVP. I think of speed a lot of times as how fast the disc feels like it's coming out of your hands, and sometimes it correlates to how far the disc will go. If a disc is a 10 speed and it has the same flight characteristics, I'm not going to say flight numbers, but the same characteristics as a 12 speed, the 12 speed should go farther if you can throw the 12 speed hard enough to make it go farther, because it requires more speed out of your hand to get it to fly, which is why if you're new to the game, you might be able to throw 5 speeds, like this Axiom Paradox, farther than 13 speeds, like this Ezra Aderhold Nuke. Speed also can be affected by the weight of the disc, because if it's lighter, it's going to be easier to get up to speed. But there are also 3 other numbers here. Glide, who knows how that's calculated. MVP has some 7 glide discs. DGA has some 4 glide discs that should probably be 5 or 6, like the Cordon and Pipeline. And then turn and fade. We're not even really going to fully get into those here. There's way better explainers out there on flight numbers than what I can do in this video. Needless to say, flight numbers will continue to be a part of disc reviews, even though that is kind of a problem because companies put them on discs and put an expectation in somebody's head. And I want to see if that expectation is true. But one of the biggest problems with flight numbers comes down to disc inconsistency. This is honestly infuriating because sometimes discs that have the same colors, the same weights, the same plastics will have different flights. What are you supposed to do with that when you're trying to review a disc? This is why you'll see a lot of multiples around here, and sometimes they're only singles because I'll give one away because I lost the challenge. But for instance, these Sysmania MD4s, I was pretty happily surprised. They're different colors, they're slightly different opacities, and they ended up flying the same. So having 2 discs can be super helpful for that. If I do only have 1 disc, or a reviewer only has 1 disc, you might have different experiences with that disc, and there might also be different experiences based on simply elevation. I'm in Denver, so I'm at 5,200 feet of elevation, so there's a little less glide in the disc. There's a little more overstability, which is another reason why comparisons are so key, and we'll get to that in a second. But it can get hard sometimes when, for instance, I go to my infinite disc, all this, and I take a look at my Romans, and I have 2 swirly S-bend Romans. This one was in my bag for a while when I went and played at Waco because it is nice and overstable. You can hit it on some Anheuser, it'll hold it, mostly glidey. This one, I thought would be a nice little replacement, but for some reason, you throw it on Heiser, it flips and turns a little bit. Every company has some problems with inconsistency. Some are known for better consistency than others. And some companies, I like to have multiple different colors and types of discs and different plastics just in case there's a little bit of a difference. But even though I've thrown these enough to know that it's the discs that are relatively inconsistent, sometimes there's reviewer inconsistency. Throw to throw or day to day essentially. And again, this is why I keep bringing this up. I always love comparing discs. You know this in your game. You don't always throw the same. And if I'm out there reviewing this Nordic Phenom 3 and I have an idea of how a C-Line DD3 flies, or for instance, this Thunderstone DD3, the Neo DD3, and I'm just like, oh, I threw that before, I know how that flies. Well, if you're getting better at disc golf, like the when I reviewed this, I probably threw 75 feet on average less than I do now. If I have an idea of how this flies and then I go and throw this, the review might not be as accurate as if I just brought the discs out to compare them. Through comparison, on the same day with the same throws, that helps to mitigate the throw-to-throw inconsistency because you can get multiple throws. And sometimes I'm just releasing on hyzer, and then I'll try to release on hyzer the next time and it'll come out. Well, that's not my problem typically. Typically I'll try to release it flat and it'll come out on hyzer. But this is also why it's important for me to know my throw. And I'm so much better at this on a backhand than on a forehand. Rarely ever, if ever, going to see me throw a forehand and it not come out how I want, and me to make a definitive statement about the disc. If I throw a backhand and it doesn't come out exactly how I want, I typically know exactly what I did wrong, whether I missed the nose angle, whether I missed the angle, because I feel so much more dialed in with my backhand that even if I'm not throwing perfect shots, there is an element where you'll have to trust that what I'm saying is true. And if you're new to the channel, how can I expect you to do that? So watch multiple reviews and I try to always get enough throws in, which is why I typically play 9 or 18 holes to form a good opinion, even though I think I have it right after 3 to 5 throws. And I'm often not surprised after that on my backhand. Forehands, I don't do that because my forehand is not nearly as consistent, because it's much harder for me to know exactly what I missed in a forehand throw than it is for a backhand. And sometimes I'll get comments when I'm reviewing discs that are like, oh, you threw them all so different. For instance, in that trail video, I threw a bunch of other 10 speeds and some of the throws came out very similar and a lot of them didn't. But another big problem with disc reviews is that reviewers, like me, are inconsistent with their throws. But arguably even worse than reviewer inconsistency is reviewer bias. Things can get pretty interesting with reviewer bias because it can be a little more subtle than you may think. It might be pretty obvious that as someone who's sponsored by Infinite Discs, I get a lot of discs from them, I get all the discs to review from them, they pay me, and even though I try to be as unbiased as I can be and tell you even a lot of the things that I don't like about a lot of their discs, why things are going in and out of the bag, why I never choose to bag some of them, I'm probably not going to be as harsh on them as I would a company that isn't doing anything for me necessarily. I even saw this come into play a little bit interestingly with the Latitude 64 Project Grip discs, like this Grace here. I have a really good relationship with a lot of disc golf companies, which I don't think is inherently a bad thing, but this is something for you to for sure watch out for if you're watching reviews and hold me accountable for if I'm doing anything crazy. But Latitude was on vacation when I reached out and saw that they had announced the Project Grip boxes. Typically, they might send one out for some influencers to market them. I think they got all sold out, and I actually bought one with my own money. And there was a little bit of an extra like free feelingness that I had when I was doing that review because I had just bought the disc with my own money. But disc golf is kind of still that small family buddy. There is something a little bit different about it for sure. And as much as I try my best to always be as unbiased as I possibly can, I know that there's probably going to be bias that creeps in for me and likely for everybody else, because not only is it a little different if I have to pay versus company send me discs, but there are some companies who go above and beyond when they send things, and they send multiple discs and maybe some extra discs, and they don't expect a lot. And so there's some companies that I have really good relationships with, and there's some that I don't have relationships with, and that doesn't mean that I don't like their discs as much, but I do have to check myself sometimes to make sure that I'm not getting overly enthusiastic about a company just because they're treating me well, and I'm actually reviewing the discs as best as I can. Personally, this is another reason I actually love being sponsored by Infinite, because they're a retailer, they sell everything. They don't really care what I say about anything, frankly, which is really nice because they'll send me out any disc. And even though I filmed this review for the Innova Gorgon, and I thought it was fine, didn't quite fit my hand super well, but I personally had recommendations for basically any other disc over the Gorgon in this category if you're looking for something like this, even though I know a lot of you guys love them. Personally, I didn't get along too well with it, but because Infinite still sells them, I was able to put the link in the description and try to give pros and cons for every single disc, because I try not to push, you should buy this, you shouldn't buy this, too often. I try to just give an overall general opinion, which is mine, and hopefully you can come to your own opinions. The reason that bias can sometimes creep into these reviews a little bit easier in like a disc golf niche is not just a problem of bias, but it's also a problem of cost constraints. There are really 3 types of problems that come with cost constraints: money, time, and plastic to use in reviews. The reason I have so many discs right now is I've honestly been trying to fix some of these constraints, plastic constraints a little bit, because I want to compare discs that I review to as many discs as possible to give you an idea of what it would fly like if you've thrown one of those discs before, which is why I have so many discs, and there's still so many that I don't have. For instance, in the trail video, everyone was very concerned that I didn't have a Champion Beast. A part of the plastic constraint actually comes from a money cost constraint, because disc golf companies are not paying for like creators like me to review their discs. A lot of times they'll send discs out to be reviewed, sometimes with no expectations, but obviously like if you don't review it, they're probably not gonna invite you to review the next one. And since they're not paying you, sometimes it just feels like a little bit of a bonus that somebody is sending you discs, which is awesome. I think it's one of the coolest parts, honestly, about my job. But if you're trying to turn this into a business and you want to get the most out of it, after you're done reviewing a disc, you might need to sell that disc or trade that disc to get another disc to review to kind of continue making more videos, because videos are what fuels these small businesses, which is ultimately what being a creator is. And as I continue reviewing discs, I'm trying to keep more of them so that as I do review more, I have more comparisons to give you guys. But the problem isn't just a money or like a plastic constraint, it's also a time constraint, because I can only allocate so much time to a specific review, but there's also only so much time that I can have a review, because ultimately, to me, what I'm doing here on this channel is it's getting smaller and smaller. My goal is to give you the most informative entertainment. I really like making videos. I've wanted to be a YouTuber since I was in middle school. I also like reviewing things, and I want to make sure that like you get a lot out of the videos, not only entertainment, but also if you are in the market for a disc, I want you to make the most informed decision possible, which is why I'm continually trying to get better. So if you do have suggestions, I read almost all the comments. But to me, the entertainment is first, and the discs that are being reviewed are kind of a method to give you entertainment. It sounds a little weird, but that's the way I see it. This means that I can't really just spend an hour to take a disc, take every comp, show every nuance of every single angle and every flight. I have to try to keep the videos moving at a good pace and not be absolutely insanely long. I like making longer videos. I know a lot of you like watching longer videos, but the pace has to keep moving, otherwise you're just gonna not be interested. But this also leads to even more problems, because not only am I trying to make the most entertaining video, I also need to pick something that is the most entertaining. So, I know this is a pretty harsh way to say it, but winners win and losers lose, essentially meaning that discs like the Trail, like the Gorgon, like the General, those are videos and topics that I'm more likely to choose to make, especially for this channel, than something like the Birdie Disc Golf Supply Reach, which is a nice driver that has come out, or like a Doomsday Lockdown. And I want to continue adding these to the lineup of discs that I'm comparing discs to so that they get more exposure. But I found choosing topics is the most important thing when you're trying to grow your business, your channel, get more views. And then packaging that in an interesting way, and then delivering on that packaging and more. So for instance, the Trail, I had some ideas of how I was going to package that, title and thumbnail is what I mean, before I even shot that video. I knew it was going to be a very popular disc because MVP is very popular, and then I threw it, and I genuinely think it's the best driver that MVP's ever made. So I found an interesting way to package that, and then I hopefully delivered on that if you did watch that video. I know everyone will have their own opinions on that, just like everyone has their own opinions on discs, but ultimately it's easier to review discs that are either popular, like those, or interesting, like the new Epicyclic disc that Trash Panda just came out with, which is like the first one of those since the Arobi Epic in 2004, or this massive dinner plate size disc like the Doomsday Discs Bunker Buster. It's not only easier to make videos that kind of ride that hype train, but it also makes more sense because more people are going to be interested in that, and that serves the largest audience of people who want information about the more popular discs or the more interesting discs. And to some, that may be seen as a problem because these smaller companies are trying to grow, or maybe underrated discs just completely fly under my radar, like apparently the DGA Undertow 10.4 -11 is very similar to the Trail. I had no idea. I'd never even heard of that disc really. And I did research trying to find a lot of the 10 speeds that are out there, and it just didn't even come up. So be aware that just because a disc has hype, everyone's going to talk about it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's better than every other disc. It's just something that people are going to be interested in and talk about. And if they haven't tried all the other discs, it might seem like it's better than the other ones, but I haven't tried everything. I've probably tried more discs than 99.9% of disc golfers, but there's still so many that I haven't, and that probably is a little bit of a problem. Remember the golden rule, and I have 5 rapid fire problems that I think would be best to just keep in mind as you're watching reviews. 1, physical differences of the reviewer and the audience. So I'm going to be different than you. I'm a 5'6", 162-pound dude with very small hands, so my hand size is going to be different. So discs are going to feel different to me. For instance, Gorgon didn't really like it. Some of you guys absolutely love it. I might have a different speed or spin of the disc. We might throw the same speed, but have different spins, so flights are gonna look different. Maybe different preferred angles of releases. I always try to note this in the reviews and tell distances and how things are flying at different distances and release angles, but sometimes it just slips past your mind, especially if a disc feels slightly uncomfortable and I don't quite notice it, and maybe it's a little subconscious, but I don't have quite the cleanest releases with it. Second rapid fire, I finally get to blame you a little bit, but not actually, is personal bias towards or against the company from either you or from me. This comes down to getting discs sent for free, not getting discs sent, maybe having good or bad experiences with companies, or discs in the past. I try to remove this from my reviews. Obviously, I can't always be successful at it because sometimes it's subconscious, but sometimes you have subconscious bias that comes towards a disc where you love a company, you love a player. I review a disc, I don't like it as much. That could 100% just be that it's not for me and it is for you, but it could be easy to write off that opinion, and then it comes kind of the opposite way where there's a lot of people, even if I review something Prodigy and I think that it's good and I give a good review, there are always going to be people who just don't like it, or they don't like the practices of a company. Lone Star comes to mind. A lot of people didn't like them as much, and not that I don't like them that much, they just haven't reached out and I haven't reached out to them, which goes back to another problem of like, it's not going to be equitable what people review because there's only so much time that they can allocate, and they're probably going to allocate it towards things that are easier or more popular. The Third is that the reviewer is answering their questions, not yours. There are some times where like I'll go on Instagram and see, hey, what questions do you guys have about a disc, or I'll go on Discord. But a lot of times I'm just excited to get out and throw discs, and I compare them and I answer my own questions that I have in my head. And then you guys might have a question that doesn't get answered, and so maybe you need to find another review to do that. But always trying to get better and better at that. And so if there are new discs that come out and you have questions about them, you can always reach out to me over on Instagram. And I'm trying to get better at actually asking those questions, because there's some things that I just don't think about that you do. But sometimes you guys ask me how discs smell, so it's a little crazy. I'm trying to continually get better at understanding you guys as my audience, because you're giving me the best honor of like letting me do this for my job. Also, another bonus problem that I just thought of as I was looking at this is that I'm a very excitable person, and I like to convey that. If I really like a disc, I'm gonna really like a disc, and I'm not like trying to sell the disc. I'm just expressing how I feel about it. And so buy discs if you want to buy discs, if they make you happy, but like you just don't need every disc. And it goes back to the golden rule. Basically, all discs are good, and there's not a lot of discs that are way better than other discs. So maybe that's the second caveat we can put down there. But if I'm super excited about something, that does not mean you have to buy it. I hope you know that. And finally, something that I think some of you might be able to help me out with a little bit, and that is technological constraints. How much you spin it is going to affect the flight a lot. How hard you throw it is going to affect the flight a lot. And the tech disc, which I have on the shelf up there, is a disc that has a puck on it that can tell you the nose angle, the spin, the speed, the wobble, but it's calibrated to a specific disc and you can't take it off. I have heard that there's something called game proofers. It's like a movable one of those. If anyone has any contacts with them, I would love to get in contact with them so that I could implement it in more reviews, because I think it would be really helpful to see, oh, if I throw this at this speed and spin, and then I compare it to another disc and put some technology on that, I can see exactly how they'll fly differently when you're throwing them at exactly the same speed and spin. More data, I think, will always be better. But this also goes kind of back to the overall size of disc golf and how we're still a small sport and there's still a lot of cost constraints. Hopefully this does get better as time goes on, and I would of course love to continue making reviews better and better as much as I possibly can. These are a lot of the major problems that I see. If I missed any, please let me know, but I look forward to doing a ton more reviews, and hope that as you continue to watch them, you notice these things. Hold me accountable if I do anything crazy, but feel like you can make better decisions overall about your disc golf game and like your purchasing decisions around discs. And if you want to see how kind of this all plays out in one of my favorite reviews, and probably the most well-done review I might have ever done, please check this one out up here. I will say there's going to be some bias in it, which is why I try to take myself out of it as much as I can, because it's about my Tour Series disc from Infinite this year. I just been getting a ton of comments that I think are very valid, and I wanted to address them in a way that I thought made the most sense. And I at least try to think about these things as I'm making these reviews. It's like an art and a science and a little bit of madness all in one. You guys are the best. Peace.